Welcome to Shop Talk Podcast, where the talk is shop and the shop is, it's Santa Rosa we're talking. This is going to be a fun episode. I'm excited. We have Arc Thames, right?
That's right.
Very excited to have Arc on. He's a guy who's super well known around this office. In the emergency management arena in the EOC. He is a volunteer that I would bet most people don't realize is a volunteer because of the amount of time that he spends volunteering and around emergency management. So I'm excited to have you on. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be on.
Appreciate the opportunity, buddy.
And we're going to talk about some cool stuff. We're going to talk about CERT. We're going to talk about ARES. All of which we're going to go over here in a few minutes, but it'll be hopefully an opportunity for people to understand how they can get involved in volunteering in general, but definitely within some cool realms within emergency management too. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, what do you do outside of volunteering outside of being at the EOC? Right. What is it that you do for a living?
You know, that's really where I spend most of my free time is up here. So it's like a home away from home, but day job wise, I am a data center operations manager for a defense contractor. I've been with them 21 years this year, so long time career. Before that, I was a trainer, and then high school before that. But very much involved in the technology world, as you will.
Yeah.
But growing up, my mom worked for the Florida Department of Transportation, and so she would come home when we had hurricanes and things like that. She'd be telling me about the stuff that was going on at the EOC and how they're tracking the hurricanes. And mind you, this is before the days of where we had online websites to track hurricanes and all that. So, you know, the National Weather Service would give you a set of coordinates, and then you had to go on a map and plot it. So I had this old DOS software that I'd sit in the bedroom and track the plots. And, you know, like when Hurricane Aaron and Opal hit, you know, it would alert you when it got within 100 miles. And that's when we personally made our family decision whether we would evacuate or not, you know, how close it was to hitting us. And so I got the fever, I guess, you know, at a young age for being involved in weather and emergencies and that kind of stuff. And then my uncle retired as a captain of the Florida Highway Patrol, and so I also had a law enforcement interest. So as I grew up, one of my friends that I got to know in my 20s, he was a lieutenant over at the Crestview Police Department, and said, hey, we've got an auxiliary program.
Yeah. And
so I went through the training for that for a year, and then went over and became an auxiliary officer in Crestview. And from there, I did a ton of what I'd say event and incident management stuff. So, you know, anytime there was a parade, a festival, any kind of stuff like that, I was the one responsible for laying out the plans of where folks were going to be placed, the coordination of all the various folks that were involved in that. And I ultimately ended up, did that for 9 years, ended in the rank of lieutenant. But things got just a little bit too crazy to be volunteering as a law enforcement officer, as you can imagine. So, towards the end of that time, I had become involved with ARES over here back in 2017. So I've been volunteering with the county since 2017. ARES being the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. So it helps with providing auxiliary communications. Should, you know, the towers go down and we lose the internet and that kind of stuff, we're able to still communicate amongst ourselves locally, but also be able to respond and communicate to and from the State Emergency Operations Center without any sort of internet access or anything else. So I got involved with that, and then going on 3 years ago, Tim Trowbridge, who's the logistics chief here, we knew each other previously, and he asked me if I would help him bring the CERT program back to the county. It had only been in Navarre for the longest time. They had some other groups locally throughout the years, but they'd all kind of fizzled out. Navarre had stuck with it since after Hurricane Ivan, but we brought the program back countywide at that point, and have since trained a little over 100 volunteers. We've right now got about 160 volunteers on our roster.
That's awesome. That's incredible. You mentioned before the podcast, 40, was that last year?
Yeah, last year our team contributed. There's a FEMA match number that they give, and based on the number of hours we worked, we contributed about $40,000 worth of hours to Santa Rosa County last year alone.
Purely volunteer work. That's insane. Work. That's like a full-time position.
Full-time position, exactly.
That's awesome. I mean, you hit on a few things I think that are really, really important in disaster response, but any kind of event planning, which is the logistics side. I mean, so many people maybe don't realize that without the logistics of things are a nightmare, you know?
Yep. Logistics and planning are two of the big pieces. And some folks just have a knack for it. I like to think I do, especially my day job. There's a lot of that same type of logistical and planning work. And so that lends itself well, to be able to, if we've got, for example, 2 of the events we work a year are generally 100-mile bike rides. They either leave from here and go all the way up to Munson, or start in Munson, go over into various other counties up there in the north and east of us, Okaloosa and up in Alabama. And that takes a lot of coordination. One of the things that's been interesting about this position that's kind of opened up some doors to be able to build the relationships with the other agencies is there wasn't necessarily a lot of that information free flowing back in the several years ago. There may have been one of these bike rides and maybe one agency knew about it, but not everybody knew about it. So since myself and CERT and Aries have been able to get plugged into these various things, whenever I find out, hey, there's going to be a 100-mile bike ride that's going to leave Milton and go up into Munson, I'm able to coordinate with the various fire departments involved, forestry, sheriff's office, so on and so forth. So all of them know what's going on. And then one of the semi-unique things about our team here in Santa Rosa County, which is certainly a blessing, and not many of the CERT teams have this, is we're authorized to actually use the same radios that the public safety folks use, the fire departments and so on.
Right, yeah.
So when we're out there working an event by ourselves, let's say that somebody fell over and got injured and needed an ambulance, we're able to communicate directly with dispatch, ask for those additional resources, and have them sent directly to the scene. Especially up in Munson, that's a huge benefit because cellular service is so poor in that area.
Yeah.
It really allows us this unique ability to be able to coordinate those resources there from on the ground even.
Right, and I remember when I started first getting into this whole emergency management realm as a comms person, you learn very quickly that in a disaster, in a widespread disaster, it's volunteers that are the boots on the ground that are making a lot of things happen. You have all your chiefs and you have your people come in and they're stakeholders from the different agencies or whatever. But then you need people to man these different, if you have to set up a temporary living space or whatever for people who have evacuated, or man shelters or whatever it might be. One thing I'd love to hit on and get a little bit more insight on is I think especially young people today, younger-ish people, I guess, have maybe never heard of like ham radio or the importance of long range frequency radio and this idea of how we rely on our cell phones so much, we rely on the internet so much, and we talk about this on our team a lot, is how are we going to communicate with people when there is no internet, when there is no cell service, and it's going to be radio. And can you talk a little bit about kind of the importance of maintaining those skills and training the next generation to know how to use radio?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we've done here in Santa Rosa County, thanks to the generous donation of several of our volunteers, we offer those classes, like the ham radio technician class, for anyone that's willing to volunteer, or they're a first responder or a dispatch in Santa Rosa County. We offer the class to them for free. We pay for their test for them to get licensed for free. And then we also, if they pass their test, give them a basic radio to get started with. Because one of the things we found over the years is if you can find an excuse not to do something, you'll not do it.
Yeah.
And so we've tried to remove as many barriers as we can for folks to be able to get into it and get interested in the hobby. And then from there, we do follow-on training. One of the trainings that we've got coming up here on May 17th is on a software called WinLink. WinLink is a computer-based software that allows you to interface with certain radios, and you can send actual messages over the air, whether they be to an email address or to another WinLink user. Very similar, looks kind of like the old AOL back in the days. It's kind of what the interface looks like, but without any internet connection whatsoever. So let's say we had a Hurricane Michael level event came into Santa Rosa County. Towers were down, internet's down, cellular's down. We can't talk to anybody, and nothing is working at the moment. We can go into our radio room that's here inside of the Emergency Operations Center, and we can send either regular email type messages or ICS forms, Incident Command System forms, like a resource request for things that we're needing, or just communicate to them, hey, this is our status.
Yeah.
We can do that from our radios in the radio room with no internet access whatsoever, communicate that to the state AOC, and they can talk back to us.
That's amazing.
I actually ended up in a role, I'm the Oxcom Regional Coordinator for Regions 1 and 2. So I'm also responsible for the state amateur radio response. So anytime there's a hurricane or a major weather system or any sort of incident that could potentially require those types of auxiliary communications, I'm called upon to develop the communications plan to be able to send out to the counties that are impacted and get the volunteers lined up to man the state EOC and so on.
Yeah, what an important role. I mean, a lot of people know I'm a private service Army guy, and you know, comms and intel are like your bread and butter. If you don't have those two things, you're stuck. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to allocate resources. And so, I mean, it's just an amazing thing that you guys are able to do all these different things.
Yeah, and it goes back. You speak of the military, and it goes back to like PACE planning, primary,
Yeah.
alternate, contingency, and emergency. You know, and it's the same, or the 2 is 1, 1 is none. You know, we may not end up in a situation where we need it, but at least we have it here. We have folks that are trained on how to use it, and so should the need arise, we're able to do that. And a lot of time, folks will say, you know, hey, ham radio guys, that's all well and good, but you know, there's Starlink and there's all these other things today, which is true.
Yeah.
You know, and there's certainly, you know, we've got Starlinks here. Many of the counties do, state does. But, you know, there's also that other threat from a cyber attack.
Right.
You know, that continues to happen almost on a daily basis. And so there's the potential where we might not be able to access the internet to be able to communicate, or cellular may be down because of an attack. And we've seen some of those things happen with AT&T and others. And so ham radio is still very relevant in today's time. We actually just 2 weekends ago, as part of my state role responsibilities, we try to every other year have a major statewide auxiliary communications exercise so that as many of the counties that want to can stand up their auxiliary communications and test their communications to and from the state. So if that situation does arise, they know they've tested it, they know it works. And so the one that we recently did was, it was called Cyberstorm. I combined a cyber attack with a tornado outbreak in the state of Florida.
I was about to ask. I mean, the combination of those two could very well happen.
Absolutely, because you know, if you've been hit with a bunch of tornadoes, well, then a nation state could say, "Oh, well, they're down right now. Let's go ahead and hit them hard."
Yeah, easy picking. Yeah,
now's the time to hit them. So you know, those are the kind of scenarios. Okay, yeah, they may be a little far fetched, but I don't know. In today's time, who knows?
Yeah. Well, and Starlink is a great example. You brought up that. I love Starlink. We use Starlink for our church office internet. But you know, resources deplete, things break. I mean, things go away. So you like you said, you have to have those multiple options to be able to be prepared like that.
Yeah, and one thing about Starlink too, you know, having more of them, and you know, there's many assets throughout the state where other counties can call them in, and that kind of thing. The more Starlinks that you start to put into an area, it's kind of like the old cable modem days.
Oh,
the more
right.
that you have on using those satellites, the lower the.
I didn't realize that.
bandwidth
Yeah, that
gets.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. So you can end up in that situation where it may be on, but it's slow as crap. You know.
Right. And that's it's a good point to bring up, which is that most, you know, EM managers will always say, especially in Florida, will always say it's not a if or it's a when. You know,
Exactly.
It's not a if we're going to get hit by a major hurricane. It's a when. Like, I think we've been so fortunate recently in the past year or so, a couple of years, that we haven't had major incidents like this. But it takes 1 week and it can totally change the face of an area. So to be able to have these resources like you, leadership like you, and your volunteers that are so well trained and so willing and ready to stand up. I mean, I have literally seen Arc, when we've activated at the EOC, Arc's right there. I mean, all the time. You know what I mean? It's just like, we're there. So it's almost, that's why I think it's funny that you're a volunteer, because I don't even look at you like a volunteer.
Right. Yeah, I run into that a lot because even with our volunteers, I've gotten to where I preface this at the start of the classes now. I don't work in emergency management. I am a volunteer.
Right.
Because people start to think that, and you know, I do have a full time job, and sometimes it's a struggle to to be able to juggle all that because you know, traveling for work and whatnot, it can be a challenge. But
Yeah.
thankfully, I've got a job that understands the need for this type of volunteer work. Our job gives you a day off every year for volunteering, so I generally end up
nice.
using that for a hurricane or something like that. But they're very supportive of what I do here. And all of our volunteers, for that matter, come from a background of, especially the ones that are retired, older, that have been in the fire service. We've got several retired fire chiefs that volunteer with us. We've got numerous military folks, that have retired and want to still do something valuable with their time that work with us. So we've got quite the compilation of volunteers. And then there are younger folks like myself, but I don't find it as frequent, and that's statewide and probably United States wide for that matter. Volunteerism as a whole after COVID pretty much nosedived. I know even many of the fire chiefs around here in Santa Rosa County have told me they don't get near the volunteer response that they used to.
Wow.
And I don't know why COVID in particular spurred that, but it's a marked decline since then. And I think you really have to have a desire or a want, to use those skills that you have, because there are a lot of jobs, like I said, my job that I have during the day as a data center operations manager. It's very similar to the work that I do here, volunteering, either coordinating here or helping, with logistics in general for emergency management. It's very similar to what I do as a day job. So we need those folks that are willing to say, hey, this is really important. I have a skill set where I can fill in this position. Let me come in here and help you. I've got these skills. But it takes time, and it takes a job that's willing to let you do that.
Yeah. So, if you want to find out what CERT really is, there's a tab on our Santa Rosa County Emergency Management website. Under Get Involved, you can go over here to CERT and learn more in depth about all this stuff. And then right here, big old Volunteer Now button. That's what we want you to press on, right? So if you click on that, it'll take you to the volunteer page, and this will give you some more information. But you want to first go into a little bit of a more strict definition of what CERT actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. So CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. The idea originally came from Mexico, but ultimately it was Los Angeles County Fire Department in 1993 that kind of started the ball rolling for this. So the idea behind CERT originally was neighbor helping neighbor. So you train up folks to be able to take care of themselves in a disaster situation. Once they've taken care of themselves, then they can move out and take care and help with their neighbors and their community around them. And that's one of the things that I always start the class off with is you take care of yourself first after a disaster.
Yeah.
Because if you are not taking care of yourself, you then become a part of the problem if you start going out there and trying to help others.
Right.
So make sure you yourself are able, willing to be able to do what you need to do if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to go out there and help volunteer. Secondly, you make sure your family, your immediate family, those living with you, are they okay? Do they need anything? Because again, if you've got family members that got injured, something fell on them, or tree fell on them, or some sort of other injury happened, after a hurricane or a tornado or whatever it may be, then if you go out there and start volunteering, where's your mind going to be? It's not going to be on the task at hand. It's going to be on that situation that you've got back at home. So as long as you're okay, your family's okay, then the next step to move out into is your neighborhood. Immediate neighbors right around you. Are your neighbors trapped in their house? We're not going to go in there if roofs are collapsed and that type of thing, but if it's just a matter of a tree's blocking the door, can you help with a chainsaw, get that tree out of the way? Can you help cut the tree out of the middle of the road that's blocking the road? That type of thing. So that neighbor helping neighbor mentality is really what CERT was originally about. And there have been stories even in South Florida where a tornado has gone through a neighborhood and the local emergency management didn't even know till the next day because the neighbors had all been CERT trained. They all took care of themselves. Wow. They didn't need any outside assistance.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge ability, and that's one of the next steps that I'm looking to move our CERT program to, is going into some of these larger neighborhoods that we have, these communities where they have HOAs or don't have HOAs. Think Holly by the Sea, those types of places. Get with them and actually train their citizens, their community. They're in that one area, and then that helps them be able to take care of themselves. That's one less. If somebody can go out and help get a tree out of the yard or help make sure their neighbor's okay, that's one less call for service that EMS or fire or whoever it may be is having to handle.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the next areas that we're going into. But outside of that, once you've taken care of your immediate neighbors, then move into helping others outside. And that's where us, emergency management, actually activating our volunteers come into play. So following a hurricane, you could see our volunteers doing things like helping direct traffic at a point of distribution, or pod as you know it. Any of you that have lived in the area for a long time, you lived through Hurricane Aaron or Hurricane Ivan, you know about those locations that are set up where we're handing out MREs or ice, that kind of stuff. That's where our volunteers would be seen helping direct traffic in those situations.
Yeah.
And we train for that stuff throughout the year. We utilize several of the nonprofits in the area. We utilize this at their food distribution events for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Right.
So, folks often ask me, Art, why do we work these events? Why do we work these bike races? Why do we work these food distribution events? We're training for the stuff that in a disaster we'd be doing.
Right. Muscle memory, right?
Muscle memory, exactly. And not only that, but it also helps us build relationships with the agencies. If we're out there, working alongside a firefighter or a deputy or whatnot, it allows them to be able to see our capabilities. Hey, these guys can actually, handle this task. And, we've been honored and blessed here recently, and unfortunately, we've had a couple of deputies that passed over this last year. We were able to help the sheriff's office. I called them up and said, "Hey, can we help you?" And we ended up directing traffic for those funerals, and that type of thing. So, and those relationships at the end of the day are what matter. Being able to know who you can call if you need help, and that's what we're here for.
Well, yeah, and you glean those little things, right? Those little, even if it's at a food distribution, you glean those little tiny details that can, in a high stress environment, can make or break, or could be a huge public safety thing, or whatever. So you learn all kinds of little things that go a long way, I think, in those events.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you got this, your own website here, right? SantaRosaCC.com.
Yep, SantaRosaCC.com is so CERT and Aries both fall under a program nationally recognized called Citizen Corps. So that's kind of what we run the programs under in general. We do have a nonprofit set up for the organization as a whole so that we can take donations. But yeah, this is our main event website where we list any of our events that we're working, so volunteers can go here to see what they can sign up to work. But it's also the location where we post all of our trainings and meetings that we have. The training doesn't stop with just the initial CERT training. We're training both in the south end and the central part of our county here, and hopefully eventually the north end. We do have a few team members up in the north end. And speaking of, if you live up in the north end of the county and want to volunteer, we need you. But we do at least quarterly. We offer the basic CERT class, which gives you that fundamental understanding of how to help your neighbor, basic first aid, basic firefighting, using a fire extinguisher, those types of things. How to carry somebody out of a situation, do basic triage and that type of thing. We offer that at least quarterly. And then our amateur radio class, we offer generally at least twice a year. But due to Hurricane Helene, that ended up going up through North Carolina, we have had a huge demand for amateur radio training. Because they relied on it so heavily in North Carolina. So we actually have ended up doing 3 different classes here over the course of the last few months, and actually have gotten 50 new folks licensed as amateur radio technicians.
That's
which
amazing.
Is incredible. Yeah.
Well, and what a great example of, you don't think that you're going to use this stuff. Something happens the next week. Oh, this is incredibly relevant. Look at this. We need these things. So I think it happens all the time, especially with emergency management type principles.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also offer a net every Tuesday evening here on our local repeater. So for those that have gotten their amateur radio license, that allows them to get on the air and check in and be able to use their radio. Because again, like you said, muscle memory wise, if you get the license and you just take the radio and throw it over in your glove box, well, the day that you need to use it, is it charged? Do you know how to even use it at that point? Do you know what to say? Those types of things. So it really is beneficial to participate in those activities.
Well, and here's a good look at kind of a leadership map kind of deal here. We've got our logistics chief, Citizen Corps coordinator. That's Tim Trowbridge, right?
Correct.
So that's our logistics chief under Santa Rosa County Emergency Management.
Right.
Then alternate logistics chief, which is you.
Correct.
Right. And so you can kind of see how immediately CERT is kind of directly underneath the logs chief here at Emergency Management, and the trickle-down effect that it kind of has. So we have this organized system already, and there you are, look.
Yeah, there.
There's the leadership staff right there. So we already have this kind of great system worked out that as soon as something happens, we're gonna be ready, and that's vitally important because relaying information to our agency partners or relaying information to our residents is incredibly valuable. That's what we do in a comm side, but obviously we're going to lean on you guys heavily in messaging when something like that happens.
Right. Well, not just the messaging side, but on the CERT side of things, it really is a force multiplier. I mean, there are only so many firefighters, there are only so many deputies, so on and so forth. And you get in a hurricane situation, if we've been hit with the hurricane, those folks are going to need to take care of themselves as well. So having that, force multiplier of, over 160 folks potentially that could help us can make a huge difference in our ability to respond and help the local community.
So if you do click on that big volunteer button on the page there, and it'll bring you to here, Volunteer Santa Rosa. And if you can click on the emergency management button kind of at the bottom, and it'll bring you here to where you can sign up for some of these different things. Being able to get connected with those groups of volunteers that Arc's talking about, and be able to get that training, kind of get everything that you need to be successful in being a CERT volunteer, right?
Yep. Yeah. And if you are interested in volunteering, all you got to do is hit that big yellow sign up button at the top right hand corner of the screen. You
Yep.
fill out a basic form, and then we'll contact you to get started on your background check. We do require a basic background check just because, especially when we're working shelters and other things like that, it becomes important to have that. So basic background check, and then once you're cleared from there, we need to take the basic CERT class for interested in CERT. And we do have some folks that are interested in CERT but not interested in amateur radio, and vice versa. So either way you want to help, or if you want to help with both, that's one of the big things that we've done is to actually cross-train our volunteers. So over half of our roster of trained volunteers have their amateur radio license.
That's awesome.
And there's some that don't want it. That's fine. And there's some amateur radio operators that are like, that CERT thing's not for me. That's okay too. We can use you in either capacity.
Yeah. And that's what's cool too, is I know a lot of our volunteer Santa Rosa people are kind of working to have that cross volunteer kind of mobility, where if you're interested in working at the animal shelter and volunteering at the animal shelter, there's skills that you can bring there, and we're trying to recruit some of those people to come at CERT and vice versa, so that everybody's kind of in this interconnected system, and they can rely on each other, and they can kind of use their skills in so many different facets, I feel like, which is cool. We've come to my favorite part of the podcast, which is just the stories part.
Yeah.
I know you got some cool, maybe funny, maybe scary, who knows, stories from some of your different experiences. You mentioned something about Mardi Gras in Navarre and some helicopters or whatever. What happened with that?
So one of the trainings that we got taken, this is what I like to say benefits part of the job. There's things that happen that just happened. You happen to be in the right place at the right time. But we did, it was last year before last, we did landing zone training with our entire CERT team. So we all knew what was needed to be done in landing zone. So every year at the Navarre Mardi Gras Parade, we try to have Air Care, or whoever it is at the time, land out there and stage, just because traffic is a nightmare out there on the beach. You got one way in, one way out, other than going through Pensacola. And so I just happened to be there. We'd set the LZ up ahead of time, and then when it came time to land the helicopter, I was the closest one there.
Yeah.
So I got to coordinate the landing over the radio with the helicopter and have them laying right there in front of me. So that was
awesome.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a super cool, like practical, use of what you work on and stuff like that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And that will definitely go down as one of my core memories. It's just one of those cool moments in life.
Now they need to get you in the helicopter.
Right. Yeah. That's the next thing. Air Care.
Air Care. Listen, helicopter rides.
Helicopter rides. And then, a similar situation happened to me in Munson a few months back. I didn't land the helicopter in that situation, but, being involved with the radio side, Chief King from Munson had asked me to go out on their boat with them and help test some radios here that we were working on. So did that, and then all of a sudden they got a call for a motorcycle accident up in Munson. So followed them up there, and I was in my emergency management vehicle, so I helped block traffic and ended up in the helo. So block traffic for the helo, and there's nothing like watching that helo land right in front of you, man. I'm telling you, it's the best feeling in the world. But after that got cleared, next thing you know, we had a call for a lost kayaker. So we ended up went and helped with that. We were traipsing through Blackwater, trying to find the lost kayaker. So a lot of that stuff ends up, just being in the right place at the right time, for some of that stuff to happen. But that's the cool things that can happen. You never know what you're going to end up getting involved in with the right training.
Right.
One thing I don't want to be remiss about hitting on, which is one of our major missions here in Santa Rosa County, is firefighter rehab.
Yeah.
We offer that service to our fire departments. So anytime there's a long-running structure fire, or it could be search for a lost person, whatever it is, and they're going to be out there for an extended period of time, especially in the Florida summers, our team is staged, and we have equipment in the central, north, and south end of the county to go out and set up a cooler water, hydration packs, snacks. We can even make coffee if it's cold, that kind of thing, and provide that as well as cooling towels and other things, fans to help keep those firefighters cool down so they can go back in there and fight that fire. So that is one of our critical missions that we do. We also, several of our volunteers are trained on the air truck that Skyline Station uses, and we can go out there and actually be on scene and help refill the air bottles for them. So,
gotcha.
As things are continuing to progress, I have big dreams for the programs, both of them. It's all about, I'm not going to commit us to doing something until I know we've got enough people and the right people to do that. And so we're now to that stage where we're getting more and more people. We're expanding our capabilities, and it's only going to go up from here.
Yeah. Arc, thank you so much for what you do. Honestly, I mean, thank you, for coming on the podcast and taking your time out of your personal day off and just coming to talk to me. But the amount that you do for the county is invaluable. I know so many people appreciate you and everything that the CERT team does and all. I mean, shout out to that incredible team that does so much stuff. But I know that we can all feel a little bit safer knowing that you're kind of at the helm of that. And I just really appreciate everything you do.
Thanks, Mike. I love what I do. I wouldn't do it otherwise. So appreciate the opportunity to be able to do what I do.
Well, thank you for joining me. Thank you for tuning in and watching Shop Talk Podcast. Again, as always, it's just a place that we're going to highlight more people. We're going to highlight our county departments and our county workers, but also just community leaders like Arc. We're going to hopefully make it a place that we can learn more in a more fun, engaging way. But thank you for joining us and tune in for the next episode. Who knows who's going to be on here.